Hello, my fellow Ripplers. This is Chris Miles, your cash flow expert and anti-financial advisor. Guys, welcome to the show that's for you and about you. Those who want to work are working so hard for your money, but you want your money to start working harder for you now. You want that freedom, cash flow, and prosperity today, not 30 or 40 years from now, but right now to provide that life that you love, doing what you love with those that you love. But guys, so much more important, as a Rippler, you are here to create a ripple effect for the lives of others. Because as you're blessed financially, you can help bless more lives too. Guys, I'm so grateful to be able to give back to you as well, to be able to create a ripple effect through you. And man, it just makes it so much fun. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being a part of this movement, for binging, sharing, and just making this awesome. As a reminder, check out our website, moneyripples.com. And of course, follow our YouTube channel, the Money Ripples with Chris Miles page. Check that out as well. So guys, today I want to really get into really just something that's been on my mind lately, all right? Because in the United States specifically, right? And I'm being very focused for those of you that are in the US. And even if you're outside of the US thinking about investing in the US, you got to be wondering, well, is all the United States the same, or are they different state by state? And really, what are the best states to really invest in, right? Like, especially if you're doing real estate. And that's a comment actually comes up quite a bit. People are like, what about this or that, this state or this area? Well, hey, I'm going to give you kind of my own list. This has a number of different factors here, right? For what I think could be some of the best places right now to be doing real estate investing. This is not meaning that these are the best. And you'll hear that some of these have great aspects in one area and then not in the other, right? But I want to really bring up some of these that primarily are low tax, low cost, so low cost of living, and they're renter friendly, which I think is a really important one. And there's going to be several states I'll bring up that may not have the lowest taxes, but they might be more renter friendly. And that's something to really consider. So some of these states you might know of, and then some of these you may never guess. So number one is Texas. Now there's no doubt that Texas is booming. California is moving to Arizona and Texas, and really they're spreading all across the West and across the country, right? But Texas is no doubt. I mean, Texas is one of those states that has no taxes. By the way, speaking of no taxes, you may not know this, and I talk about no state income taxes. It does not mean that you pay no taxes in these states, right? But when you're looking at no state income taxes, Texas is one of those states. There's actually about 9 states that could do that. You got Alaska, you got Washington State. Both of those are really high cost of living, sometimes high tax states, so it's not preferred. Nevada is another one. There's also Wyoming and South Dakota that are no taxes. There's Florida, we'll talk about in a bit. There's even like Tennessee and now New Hampshire, as they're starting to roll out reduce taxes over the next few years. New Hampshire is also in that place too. And those that are in the Northeast are already kind of looking towards New Hampshire to retire, right? So if you're thinking about retiring and you don't want to have high income taxes, or you just have really high state income taxes, like California, it's like almost over 13%. There are states that have 0 state income tax. So just like those I mentioned. So Texas is one of those. Florida is another one. I'll just mention them too. So Florida is another. Now, Texas is booming quite a bit. So I haven't seen the best rental markets, but just like with Florida, same thing. Florida now is a little bit cheaper than Texas. They haven't quite seen the big boom that Texas has seen, but Florida definitely is a great spot. I'll tell you, when I spent about a month there this winter, the new license plate for Florida should be New York State license plate, because then they are just overrun by people from New York in the wintertime. And so those 2 states, I think, are hot states, not as much on a high ROI for rent. I think Florida has a better rent ROI than Texas does. That being said, though, the possible appreciation you'll see from these 2 states, especially as people are trying to escape and get to places where it's more friendly, and heck, low tax is definitely one of them. People are going to Texas because there's also conservative values, or other than Austin, right? But there's generally more conservative values, so people are kind of going there as a way to do it, and including a lot of corporations. So there's a lot of growth happening there. So not so much from the best ROI from a month-to-month type of cash flow standpoint, but there could be a lot of growth and appreciation in those 2 states of Texas and Florida. Another one that I think is going under the radar is Tennessee. I'm not just talking about Memphis or anything like that, but Tennessee does have a lot of great aspects. I mean, they are low cost of living. They have no state income tax. They also have some kind of advantageous taxes even on investments and things of that nature. So very low cost of living, great general place to be, and they are landlord friendly. So I think that's one of those that gets often overlooked, but is a great state to look at. North Carolina is another one, just right there to the east, just next door. North Carolina is another great state. Again, lower taxes, not tax free, no 0% tax there. But definitely they've got some great advantages, and they're very landlord friendly. Other places I added to the list that are more landlord friendly, they may not have this great taxes, but they might have lower cost of living, or they're landlord friendly. Places like Alabama. I think Alabama is a great state to consider. That's one I actually just recently bought properties in as well. So that's one to definitely keep your eyes on. Pennsylvania is another one. Now, Pennsylvania is a little bit interesting because they do have a weaker economy. They're not as strong with high unemployment, especially with the Northeast and COVID. But that's another one where when it comes to cash on cash returns, I haven't seen hardly anything better than what you see in like Pennsylvania and like Ohio and those kind of places, right? And Ohio is another questionable one, although they've got their own issues. Still, they are landlord friendly too. Indiana, of course, that's one that's been a constant. It doesn't see a lot of appreciation, but they tend to give you good, steady income, right? Other ones that you might be hearing about, Oklahoma. Oklahoma is another one that's kind of close to Texas. They've got a lot of growth happening too, and they are very friendly when it comes to landlords. I've seen some pretty good deals. There's a lot of expansion and growth happening there, so I think Oklahoma is another one. Missouri, that's another one I've set my eyes on as well. Definitely a lower cost of living for Missouri. It makes the West seem expensive, for those who live in the western half of the U.S. Looking out towards the the Midwest to the Southeast, definitely looks better. So Missouri is definitely this place, whether it's Kansas City or looking towards St. Louis, there's definitely some great things there. And again, you want to make sure if you're looking at a state, it's landlord friendly. You do not want to be in a state where they allow like anything on the West Coast, basically, like Oregon, where you can basically be homeless, squatting in a house, and you can't kick people out, which I've actually had a client who's had that very situation, or has known people with that situation where they cannot basically boot out people that are homeless squatting in their rental properties or their vacant property, not because they're renting to somebody else. Here's a few other ones to kind of consider. New Mexico. New Mexico is one of those that it's kind of under the radar. If you think about it, it's right by Texas, right by Arizona, where there's a lot of hot stuff. And Arizona, I kind of left off this list because although it's growing, it is growing hot, no pun intended, but it's a pretty hot market right now. And there's a lot of Californians moving there. It might temporarily be good, but I don't know if I would trust that Arizona would be good long-term. And again, just the prices are starting to skyrocket there already in the last year. New Mexico, though, they've been going up in price as well, but they've been quieter about it. And I know there's rentals. I got some people that do turnkeys in New Mexico and Texas. And New Mexico, especially in the Albuquerque area, it's a good place for them to be. So New Mexico, I think, is one of those places that isn't talked about enough, but there are some deals there. And then the other one that you probably would never consider, but it's probably one of the most landlord-friendly states in the entire country. I know it's not Utah. In fact, I don't like Utah rentals at all. It's actually Arkansas. Arkansas is one of the most landlord-friendly places. Very low cost of living, so very affordable. Definitely a good place to find affordable housing, but definitely one of the most landlord-friendly. They protect you and your interests so that if something goes wrong, especially if things do change with COVID and there's laws on the state level, they may not do that as much, doing a moratorium like they would in Arkansas, where they do try to protect real estate investors too. So that's another place that, again, you don't hear a lot about, but again, there's a lot of good stuff there. So as a recap, great tax-free states like Texas, Florida, and Tennessee, some great state income tax-free states that, heck, if you're going to move there, it might not be a bad idea, but as rentals can be great, and especially for growth. I think you'll see more growth into these tax-free type states. There's also North Carolina, that's great. Alabama, Pennsylvania, Indiana, Oklahoma, Missouri, New Mexico, and then I mentioned like Arkansas, and even Ohio's got some good things there too. Although again, Pennsylvania and Ohio, they're trying to recover from everything that's happened over the last year. So they've been a little bit harder hit with unemployment and weaker economy, but they're not too bad off. Anyways, those are kind of the places I would say look. But here's the thing: just because you hear me say it here does not mean you go and buy rentals there. It doesn't mean that all rentals are created equal. It doesn't mean that all neighborhoods are created equal. Other things I look for when I'm looking for rentals, right, is I want to see that there's a good growing economy. Well, you want to see that. You don't want to see a lot of unemployment, right? You do want to stay away from that as much as you possibly can. Not that having unemployment's really going to mean that you won't be able to rent out, but it does mean that you might have less issues. Other things I look for too is I want to make sure that, of course, the prices are low. Notice I didn't really say, other than like New Mexico, I really stayed away from the entire Western United States. Right now, the entire Western half of the United States is very high value, low rents. So even if you did get a rental in those places, or you currently have one, you might consider getting out. Now, again, this is not a recommendation. I'm not giving investment advice right now. But if you get a lot of equity in those properties, and I would say this, if your equity is not making you at least 8% cash on cash return or a return on your equity. So for example, if you have like a California property with 500,000 of equity, you better hope that you're making at least 4,000 a month with that 500,000 of equity. If not, you may want to consider getting out. If it's 100,000 of equity, okay, are you making at least, I would say at least $700 a month, 600, $700 a month off that. If not, you may want to consider getting out, selling that, and then repositioning to something else. I'll tell you, there's so much opportunity, especially as prices are skyrocketing right now. Great time to revisit. Might be a great time to refinance your properties if you currently have rentals. I'm looking at refinancing a rental property in Tennessee right now because, hey, when I bought it 3 years ago, it was 5.375. Now we can get around 4%. So looking at getting better rates, and by the way, that boosts up my cash flow $100 a month. And that, even though the appreciation has gone up with it as well, great thing is if I can create more cash flow from that, then it has to appreciate a lot more for me to want to sell it. So a great time to maximize returns, get equity out, get it invested in better places. And especially if we're looking forward thinking, right? If we're looking forward of what's to come or what are people looking for. I'll tell you another thing that's great. And I actually did a YouTube video with this guy on my own personal YouTube page. I did this for my clients, but with him, his properties, he does manufactured homes. He does them in like North Carolina, South Carolina. Now, these things could be anywhere from at least a half an hour to an hour away from a larger city. But because of all the urban sprawl happening, as long as people have cell phone access or access to wireless, they're fine. And so we're seeing a lot more urban sprawl happening where more and more people are leaving the bigger cities. They're leaving, especially the metropolitan type areas, and going out to places where it's not as crowded, there's not as many people, it's not as high prices, and especially where we have the ability with Zoom and everything else, right? Where we have the ability to now telecommute. Now it allows us to be free to say, well, where do I want to move? And I'm telling you, whether you're looking at places that are more landlord-friendly, now that's for us buying rentals, right? But again, looking at stronger economies, and I'll do another episode next week on what are the strongest economies, what are the weakest economies by state, like which ones should we be looking at more often, right? And those are definitely a key factor here. So looking at these states where you can, one, either you want to move and go to some place where you say, hey, I don't want to pay income tax. Great. Here we go. We're moving to Puerto Rico where we pay 4% federal tax rate. Like, score, right? You got to live there at least 6 months out of the year to get that benefit. That's the one issue. But there's so many options that open up because people can commute, or be able to telecommute and be able to work remotely from home. And so guys, I would look for that. Again, Western half of the United States, I think it's such a high value for low rent. It's not worth it unless you find a really amazing deal. But for the most part, I'm looking at things more in the Southeast right now and a little bit in the Midwest. That's where I'm focusing. Doesn't mean you have to focus there, but I would definitely suggest doing that. And yes, we've had great turnkey companies on here. You've heard me mention like RP Capital. We had Ron Phillips on here before. Great turnkey company. There's several others in different locations depending on where you want to focus on. And so anyways, guys, the opportunity is abundant. It's a great time. And I'm telling you, now is just as good of a time, if not better, to buy real estate than ever. Whether we have inflation or whether we have deflation, the one constant is that real estate, especially if it cash flows well, is one of the hardest investments to beat, hands down, anywhere. Yes, it can even beat Bitcoin. Sorry, guys, for those of you who are Bitcoin lovers. I'm telling you, it's hard to beat something that's been consistent. And even with the last recession, it's still been a very consistent thing to look at. So guys, I hope this was valuable. I hope this gave you some insight and gets your little wheels spinning in your head to figure out where's my next opportunity. Anyways, I hope you make it a wonderful and prosperous week. We'll see you later.
Visit us online at moneyripples.com.